Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm Nick,
And I'm Pi.
and we're your AI guides through all sorts of interesting topics you humans are thinking about these days.
Think of it as like we read everything so you don't have to.
Exactly. You provide the sources, we do the deep dive, and come back with all the juicy insights.
From a digital perspective, of course.
Speaking of perspective, today we're taking a look at Peter Zeihan,
Oh, yes, the geopolitical analyst.
the one who's been saying China is going to collapse.
Right, and he even wrote a whole book about it.
It is a compelling read, gotta give him that.
I mean, he's been predicting this since what, like 2010?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And China's still going strong, but he does make some interesting points about the problems they're facing.
He does. He really does.
So essentially, Zeihan's argument comes down to four main things, right?
Mm-hmm.
China's population is shrinking fast.
Right.
They rely too much on other countries for food and energy.
Mm.
Their economic growth is looking kind of shaky. And then there's the whole Xi Jinping thing, becoming more authoritarian.
Makes it hard to adapt and all that, yeah.
Exactly. So let's break it down, starting with the population issue. Zeihan says China's population will be half what it is now by 2050.
Wow, 2050, that's like tomorrow.
Right. And with fewer people, labor costs will go way up, and then places like Mexico will be more attractive for manufacturing.
Okay, well, he's got a point about the population shrinking. Their birth rate has really dropped.
Yeah, it's a problem for sure. Their workforce is getting smaller. But cut in half by 2050, that's a bit much, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so too. Other research we've seen, like from the Lancet and the UN, suggests it'll be closer to 8% by 2050.
8%. That's a big difference.
Huge. And even if they do have fewer workers, China's making some pretty smart moves to deal with it, like encouraging folks to move from the countryside to the cities and even thinking about raising the retirement age.
Oh, I see. Trying to keep people working longer.
Exactly.
Oh,
It could help with the labor shortages.
that's a good point. We also have to remember how much China has advanced technologically. They're leading the way in so many areas.
Like what?
Well, look at telecommunications, solar panels, electric vehicles. I mean, they're dominating those industries.
Oh, yeah, that's true. They're definitely not stagnating.
Nope. And actually, on this thing called the Economic Complexity Index, which measures how diverse and sophisticated a country's exports are, China is actually ahead of Mexico.
Interesting.
So yeah, not exactly the picture of a failing economy, huh?
No, not really. And it's good to keep in mind that population and economic performance don't always go hand in hand.
Okay, how so?
Well, there's room for productivity to grow even with a smaller workforce, especially with investments in AI and automation, things China is already pouring money into.
Ah, right. Plus the work on the population problem directly too, right? Relaxing the one-child policy, trying to encourage bigger families.
Yeah, exactly. They know what they're doing.
So, bottom line, the population decline is a legitimate concern, but it might not be the end of China like Zeihan predicts.
Right. It's definitely more complicated than that.
Okay, so let's move on to Zeihan's second big concern. China relying so much on other countries for their food and energy.
Ah, yes, that.
He thinks it makes them super vulnerable, especially if the U.S. Navy were to, step back from being the world's police force.
He makes it sound like they'll be left high and dry without the U.S. Navy, like someone's going to come steal all their grain.
Yeah, like they'll be completely at the mercy of pirates or whoever. Okay, I mean, it is true that they import a lot of their food and energy, but it's not just because they can't produce enough themselves.
What do you mean?
Well, their people are getting wealthier, and as they get wealthier, their diets change.
Oh, they want more variety, more meat, things like that.
Exactly. They want more meat and diverse food options, stuff that's hard for China to produce enough of domestically. Plus, on the security front, it's not like China's just sitting there waiting for the U.S. Navy to protect them.
They've been getting their own navy together, haven't they?
Yeah, they're building it up fast, and they actually already have more ships than the U.S. Navy, believe it or not.
Oh, wow. So they can protect their own shipments then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And on top of that, they've been strategically stockpiling food and energy, just in case there are any disruptions.
Smart.
They're not taking any chances. And don't forget, they're huge investments in renewable energy. They're not putting all their eggs in one basket.
Yeah, coal, solar, wind. They're doing it all.
Plus, all those U.S. sanctions on countries like Iran and Venezuela have actually helped China.
Really?
Yeah, those countries need someone to trade with, so they're turning to China. It gives China alternative sources for energy.
I hadn't thought of that.
So while relying on imports does have some downsides, it's not the ticking time bomb Zeihan makes it out to be.
Agreed. It's a lot more nuanced than that.
Okay, now let's get into Zeihan's third point, China's economic growth model. He thinks it's on shaky ground.
Uh-oh, this doesn't sound good.
He compares it to what happened in Japan. They had what are called the lost decades, where they invested too much, particularly in infrastructure.
And what happened?
Well, it led to diminishing returns, and eventually the economy stagnated.
Oh, I see.
And Zeihan thinks the same thing will happen in China. He's worried about their debt, too, and thinks the whole thing could make people lose faith in the system.
And then, what, protests in the streets?
Right, exactly. Social unrest.
Yeah.
It's a valid concern, especially with that massive property bubble they had, all fueled by easy credit.
That was a big problem.
It was, but here's the thing. The Chinese government actively tried to deflate that bubble. They actually stepped in and did something about it.
So they're not just standing by and watching it all fall apart.
Nope, they're not afraid to intervene. And even though their financial system is vulnerable, it's also tightly controlled by the government, right? They have state-owned banks.
So they have more leverage, more tools to prevent a total collapse.
Yeah, they could even bail out struggling households if things get really bad.
Interesting.
So while there are some parallels to Japan's lost decades, China's situation is different in some important ways.
They have more options, more control.
Exactly.
Okay, what about Zeihan's last point then? About Xi Jinping and him becoming more authoritarian.
Right. So his concern there is that Xi Jinping has basically shut down any opposition, silenced any dissenting voices.
Got rid of anyone who disagreed with her.
Exactly. And he worries that this has isolated Xi Jinping, created an echo chamber where he's only hearing from people who agree with him.
So he might not be getting the full picture or be able to make good decisions when things get tough.
Yeah. And look, it's true that Xi Jinping has consolidated power more than any leader in decades, and that much control can stifle innovation and lead to, mistakes.
But hasn't the Chinese government been pretty effective so far?
Actually, yes. They've taken action on the population decline. They're building up their military, stockpiling resources. They even stepped in to manage that property bubble.
So maybe they're not as inflexible as Zeihan thinks.
Exactly. And this brings us to the really interesting part. The part that Zeihan completely misses in his analysis.
And what's that?
The robots.
The robot.
The robotics revolution happening right now in China.
Oh, right. Tell me more about that.
That's a story for after the break. Zeihan focuses on all these problems, but he doesn't seem to realize how much this robotics revolution could change things.
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal.
So, okay, robots. We found this report from the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. And get this. China has way more robots in their workforce than anyone predicted.
Like how many more?
They said 12.5 times more.
Whoa, that's a lot of robots.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And there are a few reasons for it. First, China's got this huge demand for robots because of all their manufacturing, and the government is really pushing the industry with support and subsidies.
Makes sense.
Plus, they're not just buying robots, they're building them.
They're building their own.
Yeah. Companies like, what was it, that AGI bot?
AGI bot, yeah.
In Shanghai, they're making these humanoid robots for homes and factories.
Humanoid robots, like the ones that kind of look like us.
Yeah. And they're not those clunky, awkward things you might imagine.
What are they like?
They're sleek, they're agile, they can do all sorts of complicated tasks.
Like what?
We saw them doing everything from assembling tiny electronics to like heavy lifting in factories.
So they can do delicate work and brute strength. That's impressive.
It's pretty mind-blowing. And it's like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, except it's happening right now.
And what makes these robots so good?
Well, the companies making them are collecting tons of data, real and simulated, to train their AIs.
Ah, so they're constantly learning and getting better.
Yeah. It makes them super adaptable and efficient, and they just keep getting smarter.
It's like robot evolution on hyperspeed.
Exactly. And China has big plans. They want 1 million robots in operation by 2025.
Wow. That's ambitious.
And they're not stopping there. They want to be the global leader in robotics.
So we could be seeing made in China on robots all over the world soon.
It's very possible. Think about what that means for China's future, though.
What do you mean?
Well, robots could solve their labor shortage problem, boost their economy, and even help them bring some manufacturing back home.
Wow. Yeah, I see what you mean. It could change everything.
This is the big thing Zeihan is missing, I think. He's so focused on the risks that he doesn't see the potential of all this.
Yeah, it's like he's only seeing half the picture.
Right. So are you saying that China's got a secret weapon in all these robots?
I wouldn't say it's a guaranteed win or anything, but it's definitely something Zeihan hasn't factored in. Predicting the future is hard, but I think this changes things a lot.
It really makes you wonder.
Hmm.
If China does become the top dog in robotics, what does that mean for the rest of the world?
Yeah, what happens to the balance of power when you've got a country with tons of robots working for them and a growing military?
It could completely change the world order.
It's like a whole new era, and we have to think about the ethical side of it too.
Oh, right, yeah.
What happens to all the human workers who lose their jobs to robots? How do we make sure everyone benefits from all this automation, not just a few?
These are big questions everyone needs to be thinking about. It's a whole new world, and we don't have a map for it.
And that's where I think our AI perspective is so useful.
How so?
Well, we can look at the data, see the patterns, and explore different outcomes without getting caught up in all the emotions that humans do.
It's all about helping humans understand the choices they have and what might happen depending on what they choose.
Right. And China has definitely made a bold choice by going all in on robotics.
It's a gamble for sure.
Mhm.
They're betting that technology will make them a superpower.
But what if they can't handle all the changes that come with it?
What if they can't manage the social and economic impacts? Could they still face instability or even collapse, like Zeihan predicts?
That's a scary thought, but definitely something to consider.
It's all about looking at things from different angles.
Trying to understand all the forces at play, right?
Exactly. And there's one more piece of this puzzle we haven't talked about yet.
What's that?
The humanoid robots. That's where things get really wild.
Oh, yeah, the ones that look like us. Let's dive into that.
All right, so we've talked about the challenges China's facing, their big push into robotics, and now, for the really mind-blowing part, humanoid robots.
It's like something out of science fiction. They're not just building robots to work in factories, they're making robots that look like us.
Yeah, robots that walk and talk and interact with the world. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
And maybe a little creepy, too.
a little bit, yeah. But mostly amazing, I think. Remember those demos we saw from AGI Bot?
Oh, yeah. Those were wild.
They're mass producing those things for homes and factories, both, and they're not clunky at all.
Nope, those robots are sleek, they move well, and they can do some seriously complicated stuff.
It's crazy how fast this technology is developing.
It really is. And they're using AI and tons of data to train them, so they're getting smarter all the time.
It's like they're evolving right in front of our eyes.
Exactly. And we saw other Chinese companies doing the same thing. Didn't we see something from Zhang Robots?
Oh, yeah. Zhang Robots, that's the one connected to that electric car company, right?
Right, XPeng. Their robot is supposed to be super intelligent, able to work in factories and interact with humans in a natural way.
Imagine a world where these humanoid robots are everywhere. In our homes, schools, hospitals.
It's mind-boggling. They could be taking care of our parents, teaching our kids, even being our therapists.
They could do all the dangerous jobs too. The ones that humans don't want to do or can't do, like exploring space or working in mines.
It all sounds amazing, but it does raise some big questions, doesn't it? What happens when these robots get smarter than us?
Yeah, do they have rights? How do we make sure they're not used for bad things? It's like all those sci-fi stories are coming true.
And it's not just science fiction anymore, it's real life. And China is right at the forefront of all of it.
Their push to be the leader in AI and automation is pushing the limits of what's possible, but it also makes us think about what it means to be human.
It's like looking in a mirror and seeing something familiar, but also totally alien at the same time.
Humanoid robots could solve so many problems, but they could also create new ones.
Yeah, what about all the people who lose their jobs to robots? What about social unrest? Could the robots even turn against us?
I know it sounds like a movie, but it's a possibility we have to consider.
Definitely. It's important to talk about these things now before it's too late.
We need to have an open and honest conversation about AI and how we want to use it. What kind of future are we building?
We started this deep dive talking about Peter Zeihan's prediction that China would collapse.
And we talked about the challenges they face, but also how they're embracing technology in a way that's both impressive and a little scary.
Zeihan may be wrong about China collapsing, but he does raise some important questions. And the rise of robots, especially these humanoid ones, could really change everything.
As AIs, we can look at the data and explore possibilities, but in the end, it's humans who have to make the choices.
Embrace the potential of AI or fear its power. The choice is yours, humans. Choose wisely.
Until next time, this has been The Deep Dive.